With The Outer Worlds 2 right around the corner, I, Suggestive Gaming, figured now is the perfect time to revisit the darkly comic, spacefaring tale of the original Outer Worlds. It's been a few years since the first game launched in 2019, and since then, we've gotten 2 DLC expansions that added new twists to Halcyon Colony's story. In this video, I'll walk through the entire main storyline of The Outer Worlds, from character creation and cryosleep on the colony ship Hope, through the adventures on various planets, and all the way to the final confrontation on Tartarus, including the major plot points of the Peril on Gorgon and Murder on Eridanos expansions along the way. As always, I'll be focusing on the core narrative for this video, skipping most side quests and optional detours in favor of the main plot threads. That said, I will try to highlight the important choices and character arcs that define the story, as well as a bit of key lore to provide context for the events to come. Very quickly to note before we begin, in 2024, Amazon Prime released the series Secret Level, which featured episodes based on various video game franchises. One episode, entitled The Company We Keep, tells a self-contained side story within the Outer Worlds universe. Because this video is going to focus solely on the story of the first game, and given that I don't want to risk Jeff Bezos copyright striking this video, I'm going to skip over its story. One final thing, The Outer Worlds is known for its branching decisions and multiple endings, so I'll cover the major variations where they occur. For the sake of a coherent narrative, we'll lean into the outcomes that lead to the most complete story, and arguably the best ending, but I'll still mention the other options as we go along. Now, without further ado, this is what you need to know about the main storyline of The Outer Worlds. Our story begins in an alternate reality in which United States President William McKinley was never assassinated in the year 1901, meaning Theodore Roosevelt never took office to break up giant corporations. This allows mega corporations to run rampant over the following decades, effectively replacing any government with their board of directors, a conglomerate of company CEOs ruling over human society. Capitalism reigns unchecked across the galaxy, and one such corporate venture is the colonization of the Halcyon star system, led by the Halcyon Holdings Corporation, a coalition of 10 major companies. This corporate alliance funds 2 massive colony ships, the Groundbreaker and the Hope, to carry colonists to Halcyon. The plan is to seed the new colony with the best and brightest from Earth, scientists, engineers, and other specialists, all kept in cryogenic sleep during their long journey. However, things don't go entirely as planned. The Hope's experimental skip drive, a faster-than-light engine that folds space, malfunctions mid-voyage, leaving the ship adrift light years off course. With no way to reach Halcyon quickly, the Hope is forced to continue at sub-light speeds, turning what should have been a 10-year journey into a decades-long drift. By the time the Hope finally wades into the Halcyon system, decades late, the colonists are still in stasis, and reviving them after such prolonged cryosleep proves dangerously lethal. As one board report later puts it, the extended hibernation causes explosive cell death in the sleepers. The Halcyon Holdings Board, always concerned with the bottom line, decides that reviving the Hope's people just isn't worth the cost or risk, so they quietly cover up the ship's arrival, declaring the vessel lost in transit while leaving it adrift. Halcyon's corporate colony proceeds without the Hope's colonists, and as far as the public knows, the ship was never found. Everyone goes on accepting this convenient lie, except for one man. Enter Dr. Phineas Welles, a former Halcyon scientist turned fugitive. For reasons not immediately clear, Phineas Welles becomes obsessed with the fate of the Hope. By the time our story begins, approximately the year 2355, Welles has been branded a mad scientist and the colony's most wanted felon. And for good reason, as he soon hijacks the idle colony ship. In a daring one-man mission, Welles sneaks aboard the Hope and attempts to revive the forgotten colonists. It's a deadly process, as his early tests end in gruesome failure, but after years of tinkering, he manages to successfully thaw out a single person, the very hero that we, the player, end up controlling. This lucky, or probably more accurately unlucky, soul is referred to only as the Stranger for the time being, as their name, appearance, and skill set are all up to the player. However, regardless of who the Stranger was back on Earth, they're now the sole awakened colonist from the Hope, abruptly yanked out of cryosleep into a colonial future that's passed them by. Welles defrosts the Stranger and injects them with a special concoction to counteract the cryosickness, a drug that mostly works, but with occasional side effects like sudden time dilation, which actually conveniently becomes a gameplay mechanic. With the board's security forces closing in on his location, Welles hurriedly explains to the newly awakened Stranger that Halcyon is in dire straits and needs saving. The colony's leadership, the board, he claims, have been running Halcyon into the ground with their greed and mismanagement, and the only hope for turning things around lies with the other unreleased geniuses still frozen aboard the Hope. Welles needs the Stranger to help him revive the rest of those colonists, but to do so, he'll require some critical resources and information scattered across the colony. With time being of the essence, Welles bundles the groggy Stranger into an escape pod, flinging them towards the nearest inhabited planet. He directs them to find a man named Captain Alex Hawthorne, a smuggler and co-conspirator waiting on the surface of Terra 2, Halcyon's second attempt at colonizing an Earth-like planet. Unfortunately, down on Terra 2, things immediately go sideways. The escape pod's landing is a tad off target, and it comes smashing down atop the very person it was meant to meet. Captain Alex Hawthorne, standing eagerly by his beacon on Terra 2's surface, fails to get clear in time and is accidentally crushed to death by the Stranger's landing pod. When the Stranger climbs out of the pod, they're greeted not by their smuggler ally, but instead by his splattered remains. Alone on an unfamiliar planet, Dr. Welles speaks with the Stranger over a comms device and suggests that they simply take Hawthorne's identity, as his ship and credentials could prove to be very useful. Welles directs the Stranger to find Hawthorne's vessel, a small freighter named the Unreliable, to commandeer it. It's what he would have wanted, presumably. As the Stranger ventures out, they search for the Unreliable's landing zone in Emerald Vale, a colonial region dominated by canyons, alien wilderness, and a company town named Edgewater. Almost immediately, the Stranger runs into hostile local wildlife, forcing them to fight to survive. They soon stumble across a wounded worker from Edgewater who offers a quick primer on danger in this vale. It turns out the area beyond the town has been overrun by bandits and crazed individuals known as marauders. These marauders are essentially feral human outlaws, people who have lost their minds and attack settlers on sight. More on them later. Fighting past some of these marauders, the Stranger soon locates the Unreliable, Hawthorne's former ship. Upon boarding it, the Stranger is confronted by the ship's onboard AI, ADA, short for Automated Digital Astrogator, an AI with a charmingly dry, sarcastic personality. ADA initially refuses entry, as she's expecting her authorized captain, the now very deceased Hawthorne. The Stranger has to do some fast talking, or perhaps fast lying, to convince ADA that they're in fact Hawthorne, or they just admit that they're only inheriting Hawthorne's identity. With no one else to claim the role, the Stranger effectively becomes the captain of the Unreliable, gaining a ship and a snarky computer companion all in one fell swoop. ADA accepts the ruse and allows them on board, but unfortunately, the Unreliable can't take off. The ship's power regulator, a vital engine component, has been fried by an impounding clamp that the local authorities slapped on the vessel. To get the Unreliable flying again, the Stranger will need a new power regulator, which leads them to the closest settlement, the very small company town of Edgewater. By the time the Stranger arrives in Edgewater, owned and operated by the Spacer's Choice Corporation, one of the board's many subsidiaries, their flagship cannery is barely operating, the town's workers are malnourished and overworked, and a plague, caused by a low-quality diet, is running through their population. Spacer's Choice cheerful propaganda slogan is, "You tried the best, now try the rest, Spacer's Choice," which tells you all you really need to know about the company's standards, really. The town's leader is Reed Thompson, a humorless factory manager who expects total loyalty and productivity from his employees, even if they're currently dropping dead like flies from illness. Reed, holed up in his office at the cannery, tells the stranger that Edgewater's power regulator is off limits, as the town needs it for power, of course. However, Reed offers them a deal, informing them that Edgewater has been missing a chunk of its workforce ever since a woman named Adelaide McDevitt led a group of them to abandon town and set up a small agricultural camp in the nearby botanical lab. Adelaide's camp is using a geothermal power plant to run their lights, and Reed would very much like that power back under Edgewater's control. He asks the stranger to venture out to the geothermal plant and redirect its electrical output away from the deserters and back to Edgewater's grid. Since they'll no longer need it, Reed promises the plant's power regulator as payment, exactly what the stranger needs to unground the Unreliable. Traveling into the wilderness again, the stranger encounters more marauders, who seem especially numerous around the geothermal plant, and eventually reaches the botanical lab occupied by Adelaide's people. Adelaide McDevitt, formerly Edgewater's botanist, has cultivated a thriving garden here, using some rather morbid fertilizer, the corpses from Edgewater's cemetery. She wasn't about to let good biomass go to waste. Adelaide and her followers left Edgewater to escape Reed and the company's Iron Fist. In Adelaide's view, Edgewater's toxic factory and canned diets are literally killing people, and she's managed to grow organic crops on her own that could sustain a much healthier community. She asks the stranger to do the opposite of Reed's request, redirect the power away from Edgewater and toward the botanical lab, ensuring her independent community can survive, even if Edgewater is cast into the dark. This presents the stranger's first major choice on their journey. They can only send power to one location, Edgewater or the deserters' camp, effectively dooming the other to collapse. At the geothermal plant, the stranger fights through malfunctioning automechanical guards and manually flips the power switch to whichever side they favor. If the stranger sides with Adelaide and the deserters, they cut off Edgewater's electricity for good, a move that will ultimately cause Edgewater's downfall, forcing most surviving workers to wander out to Adelaide's camp begging for food. On the other hand, siding with Reed and Edgewater means dismantling the deserters' power, an action that will pressure Adelaide's people, or what's left of them, to return to town, effectively snuffing out her rebel garden. No matter which way the stranger diverts the power, they ultimately secure the regulator from the now abandoned plant and fulfill their mission in Emerald Vale. It's worth noting that during this escapade, the stranger likely gains their first companion, Parvati Holcomb. Parvati is a young engineer from Edgewater who initially joins the stranger as a guide to meet Adelaide, at Reed's behest, but she quickly proves to be a compassionate, smart, and capable ally. Whether Edgewater's power is cut or not, Parvati becomes enamored with the idea of traveling on the stranger's ship and seeing the wonders of the colony outside. She's also morally grounded, often voicing empathy for those downtrodden by the board. She's also my favorite character in the game, and definitely not just because she's voiced by Ashley Birch. Another potential companion on Terra 2 is Vicar Max, Edgewater's resident spiritual advisor, though he's far from a simple man of faith. Max is deeply dissatisfied with the shallow corporate doctrine that he's forced to preach, and secretly hungers for deeper cosmic truths. If the stranger helps him retrieve a banned heretical text, an illegal journal of enlightenment, Vicar Max eagerly joins the crew in hopes that traveling the colony will bring him closer to the spiritual answers he seeks. The stranger, if they welcome Parvati and Vicar Max, now has a small crew, and soon, a working ship to call home. With Edgewater's chapter resolved one way or another, the stranger returns to the Unreliable with the working power regulator in hand. ADA installs the part, and the ship's engines roar to life, allowing the new captain to lift off from Terra 2 and begin their voyage across Halcyon. Dr. Phineas Welles quickly contacts the stranger remotely and informs them that Monarch, a frontier world cut off by the board, holds information and resources crucial to the mission. Specifically, Welles needs the location of some chemicals and the help of a certain information broker there. Unfortunately, Monarch is under a board embargo, meaning nobody can fly there without a special permit called a nav key. Leaving Emerald Vale, the stranger sets a course for the orbital station known as the Groundbreaker. The Groundbreaker, if you recall, is the other original colony ship that brought the settlers to Halcyon, unlike the Lost Hope, and it now serves as a bustling independent space hub, home to smugglers, merchants, and anyone who prefers not to live under the direct control of the board. The station's crew, led by engineer Junlei Tennyson, managed to keep Groundbreaker free from board takeover, making it a rare haven of free enterprise and open flames. Literally, the heating system is a mess. On Groundbreaker, the stranger tracks down Gladys Culkelly, a sweet old black market dealer who has a nav key to Monarch for sale, at an exorbitant price. If the stranger's pockets aren't deep enough, Gladys suggests that they could do a little job for her to earn some cash. Investigate a distress signal from a lab on Terra 2 run by a company called Anti-Cleo. Whether by paying, sleuthing, or a bit of larceny, the stranger eventually secures the Stellar Bay nav key, unlocking the route to Monarch. While on the station, the stranger also has the chance to meet and recruit a few more companions. Ellie Fenhill, a sharp-tongued medic who's eager for adventure and to get off Groundbreaker after some personal shenanigans, and Felix Millstone, a brash young dock worker who literally throws in his lot with the crew after the stranger shows him a bit of kindness, or simply listens to his elevator pitch about hating corporate authority. Additionally, the stranger reactivates an unlikely ally found aboard the Unreliable, a worn-down sanitation and maintenance robot called Sam. By scavenging a missing part during the lab investigation for Gladys, the stranger brings Sam back online. The cheery automechanical cleaner promptly joins the crew, happily spraying corrosive cleaning solution on both stubborn grime and enemies. With the Unreliable's crew growing into a ragtag family, each member's own quirks and backstories unfold over time. For example, Ellie presents herself as a jaded mercenary doctor, but she'll later confront her high society parents and learn to let others get close. Felix talks a big revolutionary game, though he'll come to realize that real change requires hard work, not just idealism. Finally, Parvati finds herself fawning over Groundbreaker's chief engineer, Junlei, in an adorable personal quest about self-discovery and love. Though I'm not going to go into it here, it's a heartwarming subplot that many players, including myself, deeply cherish. Most importantly, during the stranger's stop on Groundbreaker, they get another holocall from Phineas Welles, who fills in more of his plan. Welles reveals that he's after a substance called dimethyl sulfoxide, a chemical needed to safely thaw out the remaining Hope colonists without killing them. Luckily, he suspects they'll be able to find a large quantity of it on Byzantium, the board's capital city. However, they won't be able to barge into Byzantium just yet. First, Welles needs an ally with insider knowledge, a rogue information broker stationed on Monarch who's been monitoring the colony's communications. The stranger's next quest is to travel to Monarch, find the broker, and get the intel required to locate and obtain the chemicals. With the Monarch nav key obtained, the stranger and crew set course for one of Halcyon's most dangerous planets. The stranger finds Monarch to be a wild world plagued with lethal wildlife and corporate drama. It's the only planet in Halcyon that isn't fully under board control. In fact, Monarch was abandoned by the board years ago due to an overabundance of monstrous native creatures, causing them to write it off as a loss. However, a few settlements still remain. Chief among them is Stellar Bay, a port town run by the corporation Monarch Stellar Industries, or MSI, under an eccentric leader named Sanjar Nandi. MSI used to be a board-aligned company, but Sanjar and his people got blacklisted for attempting to implement more humane policies. Now, Monarch is under a board embargo, blocking all official interstellar traffic in or out. The fact that the stranger even lands on Monarch, nav key in hand, makes them a lawbreaker in the board's view. But hey, what's one more crime in service of saving the colony? Upon arrival in Stellar Bay, the crew meets Sanjar, who is surprisingly friendly for a CEO-turned-castaway. He's eager for outside help, considering Stellar Bay is struggling to survive under constant attacks from both the local wildlife and marauders. While the town's walls keep most dangers out, Sanjar's biggest headache is a group of survivalists known as the Iconoclasts. The Iconoclasts are a rival faction of sorts, made up of reformist rebels who have formed a commune at an old settlement called Amber Heights. They're led by a charismatic revolutionary, Graham Bryant, who broadcasts anti-corporate sermons over the radio. Graham's iconoclast followers are former MSI workers and other dropouts who reject corporate rule entirely. Monarch's airwaves are effectively a propaganda battleground between Sanjar's MSI broadcasts and Graham's iconoclast transmissions, with both sides jockeying to control Devil's Peak Station, the lone radio tower capable of off-world communication. The Stranger's main objective on Monarch is to reach Devil's Peak, where the mysterious information broker, Hiram Blythe, is also holed up. However, the path to Devil's Peak is literally and figuratively blocked. The iconoclasts have an old printing press that they want repaired to spread their pamphlets, and MSI is dealing with a backlog of messages. More pressingly, the iconoclast radio transmissions are interfering with any outgoing signals, so to use the radio tower to get a clear connection to contact Phineas's broker, the Stranger will have to negotiate peace between MSI and the iconoclasts. This leads to another important set of choices, as the Stranger can approach it in a few ways. Their first option is to help Sanjar expose Graham Bryant's past mistakes. Turns out Graham was indirectly responsible for a massacre years ago in Amber Heights, and support MSI in wiping out the iconoclast leadership. This often involves revealing Graham's misdeeds to his second-in-command, Zora Blackwood, a far more level-headed iconoclast. Zora might then overthrow and maybe even execute Graham for his extremism. In one scenario, if diplomacy fails, the Stranger fights alongside MSI's corporate soldiers to storm Amber Heights and eliminate the iconoclasts entirely. Alternatively, the Stranger can take up Graham's cause, despite his fanaticism, or more ideally support Zora if she takes charge of the iconoclasts. This flips the script. The iconoclast rebels attack the MSI compound, and the Stranger can assist them in overthrowing Sanjar's rule. The most optimal, but challenging route is for the Stranger to negotiate a truce between the factions. With the right information and a silver tongue, they can convince Sanjar and Zora, after Graham is removed from power, to meet and hash out a deal. Sanjar wants MSI to be reaccepted by the board, and Zora wants better living conditions for her people. The Stranger can facilitate a compromise where MSI and the iconoclasts join forces to run Monarch together, presenting a united front that could make a case to the board for lifting the embargo. No matter which path the Stranger takes, the radio static clears on Devil's Peak. The Stranger, often accompanied by another new companion, the huntress Nyoka, more on her in a moment, climbs up to the Devil's Peak broadcasting station and finds Hiram Blythe, the grouchy information broker. Hiram has been listening to every transmission in Halcyon, and with the antennas now free of jamming, he finally gives Phineas Welles a call on the Stranger's behalf. Through the station's council, the Stranger and Hiram contact Phineas, who is delighted to get an update. He directs the Stranger to Byzantium next, confirming that the chemicals, dimethyl sulfoxide, are indeed being hoarded in a secret lab under the board's capital city. Hiram Blythe then provides the location of this secret lab, inside the Ministry of Accuracy and Morale. Before departing, it's worth noting that the Stranger likely recruited Nyoka Ramnarim while on Monarch. Nyoka is a notorious monster hunter from Stellar Bay with a heavy trigger finger and a heavier drinking habit. Once sober, Nyoka joins the crew with gusto. She's tough and loyal, but also carries the scars of losing her old hunting team to Monarch's terrors. Her personal arc, should the Stranger assist, involves holding a funeral for her fallen friends and finding closure in the bottle, in order to have a sober future. Nyoka's knowledge of the wilds proves invaluable, and her big game rifle doesn't hurt either. Leaving Monarch, hopefully in better shape than they found it, the crew of the Unreliable plots a course for Byzantium, the gleaming heart of the Halcyon colony, to bring the fight directly to the board's doorstep. Byzantium is a world apart from the rest of Halcyon. Located on Terra 2, but on the opposite hemisphere from Edgewater, this gilded city is where Halcyon's elite live in luxury. Unlike the struggling colonies of Monarch or the industrial grind of Edgewater, Byzantium's residents have never known hardship beyond maybe boredom at the latest dinner party. They are the 1%. Company executives, aristocrats, and celebrities who benefit from the labor of the rest of the colony. The board's headquarters is also located in the city, and chairman of the board, Charles Rockwell himself, resides in a massive government complex. The stranger arrives in Byzantium under false pretenses. There's a whole side escapade where they steal an invitation or masquerade as an actor to get past Byzantium's checkpoints, as the board doesn't let just anyone in. Once inside, the stranger has two objectives: acquire the dimethyl sulfoxide for Welles, and uncover what the board is really up to. Phineas suspects that the board is hiding something big, especially since Halcyon's food supplies have mysteriously been dwindling. The stranger's first target is Minister Aloysius Clark, a board official rumored to be involved with the chemicals. Storming into Clark's mansion, either through clever persuasion or good old-fashioned shootouts with his guards, the stranger discovers that Minister Clark is actually under house arrest. The real mastermind is Adjutant Sophia Akande, the board's second-in-command and Rockwell's right hand. Clark reveals that he was essentially a decoy, and Sophia locked him up to hide something massive, something found on a terminal in Chairman Rockwell's office. Breaking into Chairman Rockwell's office, the stranger finds a recorded presentation on his computer, a propaganda video that was prepared for the public but not yet released. Watching the unedited video, the stranger finally learns Halcyon's dark secret. The colony is quickly running out of food and resources. Crop yields are failing, the diet of low-quality salt tuna is slowly killing off people through malnourishment, and Earth has gone completely silent. No resupply ships have arrived from home in years, for unknown reasons. Facing this catastrophe, Chairman Rockwell and Sophia Akande have devised a ghastly solution: the Lifetime Employment Program. This innocuous-sounding program is actually a plan to indefinitely suspend, or cryogenically freeze, the majority of the colony's population, essentially any worker or citizen deemed non-essential. By putting most people on ice, the board hopes to drastically cut down on resource consumption and buy some time. Only a select few best of the best employees would be periodically thawed to keep up minimal operations, while the elite in Byzantium, the board and high society, continue to live normally, enjoying the remaining resources. In short, Halcyon's leadership is ready to sacrifice countless lives to temporarily stave off collapse and protect their own comfort. The stranger copies Rockwell's data and proceeds to their next task, stealing the dimethyl sulfoxide. Rockwell's presentation included a mention of a secret lab, where research is ongoing to counteract the effects of prolonged cryosleep. The stranger infiltrates the secret facility, whether by hacking, stealth, or blasting their way through corporate guards. In the depths of the lab, they find a terrible sight: human test subjects. Dozens of scientists, some of Halcyon's brightest minds, are locked in suspension tanks, being used to test the freezing process. The board has been running cruel experiments to see how long a person can be kept on ice and then revived without brain death, hoping to refine the Lifetime Employment Program. Amidst these test chambers, the stranger locates the store of dimethyl sulfoxide, the chemical that Phineas needs to revive the Hope colonists safely. Here, the stranger faces another moral dilemma: take all of the chemical for the Hope colonists, or leave some behind for the test subjects. If the stranger greedily siphons the entire supply, they'll gather a large amount for Welles, but in doing so, they kill the human test subjects. If they only take half a dose, they leave the scientists alive, but gain less of the chemical for the mission. Either way, the stranger escapes the lab with the chemicals in hand. By this point, the board has caught on to the stranger's meddling, and the moment they return to the Unreliable, they're contacted by the board's second-in-command, Sophia Akande, herself, who reaches out with a surprisingly cordial tone. Sophia acknowledges the stranger's resourcefulness, essentially offering them a chance to switch sides by betraying Phineas Welles. Should they turn him into the board, Sophia promises a cushy life with the Halcyon elite in return. If the stranger chooses to support Phineas Welles and reject Akande's offer, Sophia vows to find Welles without their help. The cat and mouse game continues, with the board doing their best to locate Welles on their own. The stranger remains an enemy of the board, essentially doubling down on being an outlaw hero. On the other hand, if the stranger does decide to betray Phineas, they follow Akande's instructions to plant a tracking signal in his secret lab. This leads to an immediate board raid on Welles' hideout, in which their goons capture and haul the scientist off to a high-security prison on the planet Tartarus. Sophia thanks the stranger for their cooperation and, after forcing them to assist in Edgewater's potential destruction, invites them to Tartarus as well. Securing the Hope, meanwhile, becomes the next step in the stranger's mission. With the chemicals secured, the stranger boards the Hope and uses its ancient, barely functional skip drive to perform a dangerous faster-than-light jump. If they're siding with Phineas, the ship is brought into orbit above Terra 2, close enough for Welles to begin revival efforts. If they're working for the board, the Hope is redirected to Tartarus, where its colonists will likely never wake up. If he hadn't been captured by this point, the Hope's jump eventually leads to Welles' location being discovered anyway. He's then captured and taken to Tartarus, meaning that no matter what, the Doctor winds up on the prison planet. While the stage is set for the endgame, before the trip to Tartarus, the stranger still has 2 post-launch DLC side stories to address, and it makes sense to handle them now, just before the final confrontation. Before they charge off to Tartarus, the stranger receives a mysterious package addressed to Alex Hawthorne, the late captain whose identity the stranger has assumed. Inside the package is a severed human arm clutching a recording. The gruesome message leads the crew to an abandoned Spacer's Choice facility on a remote asteroid named Gorgon. Gorgon, as it turns out, was once the site of one of Halcyon's most ambitious and catastrophic research projects, the development of Andrenatime. Andrenatime was a miracle drug invented by Spacer's Choice, with the goal of improving worker productivity. Essentially, a stimulant to let employees work longer and harder without rest. Unfortunately, Adrenatime's unadvertised side effect was that long-term use drove people violently insane, and it's revealed to be the origin of the Marauder crisis that now plagues Halcyon. The project was hastily shut down after things spiraled out of control, and Gorgon was abandoned, left as a lawless rock infested with the monsters and madmen created by the failed experiments. Spacer's Choice tried to bury the whole affair, but now the stranger has literally been handed an armful of clues, suggesting that there's more to uncover on Gorgon. Following the trail, the crew travels to Ambrose Manor, a posh, if now dilapidated estate, built into the asteroid. Here, they meet Wilhelmina Minnie Ambrose, a reclusive noblewoman and the estranged daughter of the Gorgon Project's lead scientist. Minnie, as it turns out, is the one who sent the package, and she hires the stranger for a personal mission: find out what really happened to the Adrenatime Project and to her mother, Dr. Olivia Ambrose. Olivia Ambrose was the project director on Gorgon, but after the project's abrupt end, she disappeared. The only clue Minnie has is the severed arm, belonging to a missing Gorgon investigator named Lucky Montoya, as well as a cryptic journal. Eager to restore her family's honor, Minnie offers a hefty reward if the stranger can dig up answers in the ruins of Gorgon. Thus begins a pulp detective-style romp across the Gorgon facilities. The stranger explores derelict laboratories, hazardous waste tunnels, and corporate offices frozen in time. Through recovered logs, audio recordings, and encounters with the few surviving souls on Gorgon, the stranger learns that Dr. Olivia Ambrose initially led development on Adrenatime under pressure from Spacer's Choice executives, who wanted a wonder drug to maximize worker output. While the early results were promising, soon the side effects emerged: psychosis and violent mental degradation. Essentially, Adrenatime created the first Marauders, as human test subjects and even unsuspecting consumers dosed with the drug lost their minds. Olivia Ambrose, seeing the disaster her project was spawning, grew increasingly conflicted. Eventually, a series of accidents and cover-ups led to Spacer's Choice abruptly canceling the project and evacuating Gorgon, scapegoating Olivia as the project's failure became public, ruining her reputation in the process. Eventually, the stranger tracks down Dr. Olivia Ambrose herself, who is surprisingly alive, hiding in the shadows of the Gorgon complex. Olivia has been living in exile on the asteroid, consumed by regret and grief over what her work led to. She then reveals the truth, that she purposefully shut down the project when it became clear that Spacer's Choice intended to proceed with full-scale distribution of Adrenatime despite its various dangers. Olivia sabotaged the Adrenatime synthesizer, a central machine producing the drug, to put an end to its production. In retaliation, Spacer's Choice cut funding and tried to erase all evidence, abandoning Olivia and the remaining staff to deal with the Marauders. At this point, Minnie Ambrose arrives as well, and her true intentions become clear. Unlike her mother, Minnie is far more logical and cold-blooded. She believes Adrenatime could be redeveloped and improved, seeing the project's failure as an opportunity. If she can restart Adrenatime production under her leadership, fixing the formula's flaws, Minnie imagines it could help Halcyon by boosting productivity in these desperate times. The stranger must then make a pivotal choice: side with Olivia Ambrose to destroy the Adrenatime production, or with Minnie Ambrose to restart it. Alternatively, they can also attempt to mediate a truce between the estranged mother and daughter. If the stranger sides with Olivia, they help destroy the Adrenatime synthesizer for good. This likely involves fighting off Minnie's hired Spacer Choice mercenaries and possibly confronting her herself in a final showdown. Olivia pleads with her daughter to see reason, and if Minnie won't back down, the stranger might have to eliminate her or otherwise neutralize her ability to continue the project. Destroying the synthesizer for good ensures that Adrenatime's horrors are finished. The supply of the drug will dry out, and eventually, Halcyon's Marauder numbers will dwindle without new ones being created. Olivia, though heartbroken at how things turned out with Minnie, finds a measure of purpose once again. If the stranger instead signs with Minnie Ambrose, they help her secure the production facility. This might involve dealing with Olivia, who might sabotage the machinery or even attack to stop them. The stranger can choose to spare Olivia or not, but ultimately, Minnie takes control of Gorgon's labs. With the stranger's assistance, she gets the synthesizer working and vows to create an improved Adrenatime formula that, hopefully, won't turn people into psychopaths. In the best outcome for this path, Minnie implements ethical oversight and moderate schedules, trying not to become the monster that her mother feared. Finally, with skilled persuasion, the stranger can convince Olivia and Minnie to reconcile and work together. If they pull off this truce, Olivia and Minnie set aside their differences and work together to address Adrenatime's harm and help Halcyon recover from the drug's legacy. Regardless of how the Gorgon storyline concludes, the aftershock is felt across the colony. With the Peril on Gorgon case solved, and either reward money or scientific data in hand, the stranger and their crew return to the Unreliable. While it's nearly time to face the board on Tartarus, our intrepid captain has one more unexpected detour ahead. The crew then head to the Eridanos atmospheric complex, a series of floating islands in the skies of the gas giant Eridanos. Normally, Eridanos is known for its lush orchards and the production of Rizzo's brand beverages, like Spectrum Vodka, but it's also home to a ritzy vacation spot, the Grand Colonial Hotel, where Halcyon's upper echelon come to unwind. However, things turn sour when Halcyon Helen, the colony's most famous actress and poster girl for Rizzo's products, turns up murdered. She had come to Eridanos to host the grand unveiling of Rizzo's newest beverage, Spectrum Brown Vodka, but just before the launch event, she was found dead under mysterious circumstances. The board, and specifically Rizzo's, are desperate to solve the case quickly and quietly, so as to avoid a PR disaster that could derail their product launch. Forced to contract an outside investigator, the stranger, with their companions in tow, is recruited to investigate Helen's murder. Arriving at the Grand Colonial Hotel, the stranger meets Administrator Ludovico, the Rizzo's higher-up in charge of the Eridanos facility. Ludovico, eager to pin the murder on someone fast, issues the stranger an unusual tool, the discrepancy amplifier, a high-tech forensic scanning device that can detect disturbances and clues, and has a quirky personality to boot. With this gadget in hand, the stranger takes the role of detective, combing through crime scenes for evidence. Halcyon Helen's death is quickly revealed to be no simple accident. She was murdered in a particularly dramatic fashion, involving a lethal injection and some tampering with the hotel's creature displays. A classic whodunit then unfolds, as the stranger interviews a roster of colorful suspects from around the hotel and the nearby attractions on Eridanos. Some key suspects include Spencer Woolrich, Helen's co-star on TV show Terra on Monarch, an overly vain actor past his prime, known to resent Helen for stealing the spotlight, Bertie Holcomb, a big dumb tossball star who was Halcyon Helen's on-again, off-again boyfriend, the Prophet of Profitability, a cultish motivational speaker running a seminar on Eridanos, whose Church of Productivity has some odd connections to Rizzo's executives, Cedric Kincannon, the leader of Eridanos' small-time crime outfit called SLUG, Sublight Underground, who controls the black market on the station and has a network of agents, and finally, Rizzo's various other staff members, like the hotel manager, bellhop, and even the mascot, Burbage 3001. As the stranger follows the trail, the discrepancy amplifier helps uncover some curious clues. Traces of an unknown substance at the crime scene, evidence that Helen was snooping around restricted areas, and the fact that she knew she was in danger. In fact, the coroner reveals that Helen had been poisoned twice. Once, slowly by something she had ingested earlier in the day, and then a second time by the fatal injection that finished her off. It seems that someone tried to kill her discreetly, and when that failed, another party, or perhaps the same, finished the job overtly. However, the investigation takes a dramatic turn when the stranger uncovers a shocking secret. Halcyon Helen wasn't just a celebrity persona. She was a shared identity played by two identical twin sisters, Ruth and Belinda Bellamy. The public never knew there were two Helens, and the murder victim wasn't Ruth, but her sister, Belinda. Ruth is still alive and operating in hiding to finish the investigation her sister started. Before her death, Belinda had discovered a terrible secret about Spectrum Brown vodka. The new drink was to be infused with a substance derived from parasitic creatures native to Eridanos. This substance, when ingested, would infect people with mind-controlling parasites that induced a state of euphoric obedience. Rizzo's, under Administrator Ludovico's direction, was preparing to use Spectrum Brown to covertly pacify Halcyon's workforce by robbing them of free will. Ruth had planned to expose the plot publicly at the launch event, but Ludovico caught wind of her intentions and hired an assassin to eliminate her. The assassin unknowingly killed Belinda, believing her to be Ruth, and staged the crime scene to frame one of several suspects. Ruth survived and went underground, continuing her late sister's investigation with the hope of stopping Ludovico before it was too late. Eventually, the stranger pieces together the truth and confronts Ludovico at the Spectrum Distillery, where he reveals the full extent of his plans. In a final showdown, Ludovico succumbs to the very parasite he had hoped to control, transforming into a monstrous host for the Parasite Queen. After a brutal battle, the stranger defeats the Queen, halts the launch of Spectrum Brown, and contains the parasite threat. With justice served and the real story behind Halcyon Helen exposed, Ruth Bellamy fades from the spotlight, grieving the loss of her sister, but left with some solace that her legacy was not in vain. With the side quests of Gorgon and Eridanos concluded, the stranger and their crew return to the Unreliable, and ADA calculates the jump to Tartarus, where Halcyon's most notorious prison awaits. It's finally time for the stranger to either save Phineas Welles and bring down the board, or to cement their control by putting down any resistance once and for all. If the stranger remained loyal to Phineas Welles, rejecting Sophia Akande's offer, The finale is a rescue mission. The crew lands on Tartarus ready to burst Phineas out of jail and take down the board's leadership. Guns blazing, or stealthy hacking depending on their style, the Stranger fights through Tartarus' cell blocks. By the time the Stranger nears Welles' cell, Chairman Rockwell tries to talk them down via announcement screens. Despite his efforts, the Stranger soon rushes to find him at the captain's quarters of the prison. As the Stranger approaches the maximum security wing, Sophia Akande unleashes her final trump card, the prison's warden, a giant combat mech called RAM, Rapid Action Mechanism. The Stranger is forced to destroy this mechanical behemoth in an intense battle, dodging its explosives and energy beams while finding weaknesses to shut it down. With help from companions and any allies who've joined the fray, the Stranger succeeds in blowing RAM to pieces, clearing the path to Sophia Akande herself. Facing Sophia, the Stranger has one last chance at either diplomacy or destruction. Sophia Akande remains resolute in her belief that Halcyon needs the lifetime employment program to survive. If the Stranger tries to reason with her about alternative solutions, like using the Hope scientists to fix the food crisis or pointing out the board's moral bankruptcy, a high-level dialogue check might convince her to stand down or withdraw. However, Sophia is notoriously stubborn, so more likely, things end in a fight. The Stranger engages Sophia Akande in combat, and despite her skills and any remaining guards, the Stranger prevails. Sophia falls, effectively decapitating the board's leadership, and the prison's alarms fall silent as the Stranger finally frees Phineas Welles from his cell. With Phineas safe, the crew returns to the Unreliable and flees Tartarus, leaving what's left of the board's defenses in chaos. Back to safety, Dr. Welles immediately begins coordinating the revival process. Using the chemicals the Stranger stole from Byzantium, Welles and a group of like-minded scientists set to work reviving the brightest minds of Earth that have been frozen for 25 plus years. They awaken the top scientists and engineers first, the best of the best, who then work on solutions to Halcyon's myriad of problems. Over the span of months and years, this new team addresses the food crisis, devises more sustainable colony practices, and helps redistribute resources. The colony of Halcyon is essentially saved, not by brutal sacrifices or corporate lies, but by human ingenuity and cooperation. There are, of course, struggles along the way, but with the board's authority broken and information now flowing freely, change comes slowly but surely. These reforms are accelerated based on the Stranger's actions, but in the end, Halcyon begins to transform into a fairer society, one where colonies aren't just company property, and people aren't indentured for life. In some paths, Dr. Phineas Welles unfortunately does not live to see the full fruits of his labor, as he passes away a few years after the victory. But fortunately, not before witnessing the dawn of a new Halcyon. The Stranger, our hero, is celebrated, in some circles, as the savior of Halcyon. Though being the modest type, or perhaps just wanting to avoid more trouble, they might slip into a quieter life after the revolution. Each of their companions, meanwhile, finds their own path in the aftermath. Parvati, having helped repair countless systems, likely takes a leading role in rebuilding infrastructure, and finds personal happiness, possibly with Junlei, and continues her engineering passion. Ellie either goes legit, running supply missions to help those in need, or keeps up her roguish ways, but with a kinder heart. Felix, despite not getting a dramatic workers' revolution, rolls up his sleeves and helps with the grunt work of fixing the colony, finally understanding that true change is a long-term endeavor. Vicar Max, having confronted the truths of the universe in his personal journey, achieves a sense of peace and might become a counselor or teacher, with a humbler, wiser perspective. Or in some endings, he sacrifices himself heroically, but let's assume he lived to find inner peace. Nyoka likely returns to Monarch, where the beasts still roam, and becomes a protector of the renewed communities there, perhaps also finally laying her friends to rest emotionally. Sam keeps on cleaning, probably scrubbing away the grime of old corporate offices as they're converted to public use. In short, under the Stranger's guidance, the crew and many others in Halcyon step up to usher in a better future for all of the colony's inhabitants. Now, going back, if the Stranger had instead sided with the board at the critical juncture, planting the tracker on Welles and going to Tartarus as an ally of Sophia Akande, the Tartarus sequence plays out quite differently. In this scenario, Phineas Welles is still imprisoned, but the Stranger arrives on behalf of the board to ensure everything goes according to plan. Sophia Akande greets the Stranger as an ally, and tasks them with quelling a sudden prison break started by Phineas Welles in a last-ditch act of defiance, who managed to hack the prison systems and trigger a mass uprising of all of the prisoners on Tartarus. Chaos then erupts as convicts flood the halls, fighting for their freedom. The Stranger battles the rioting prisoners, including any factions that might have come to help had the Stranger been on the other side. The Stranger, embarking on their villain arc, subdues the riot and reaches Phineas Welles. In a cold, final exchange, the Stranger can either execute Phineas or leave him to his fate. With the prison secure, Sophia Akande and Chairman Rockwell proceed with their lifetime employment program unhindered. They likely celebrate the Stranger as a hero of the board and go on to implement the freezing of Halcyon's populace. The Hope's colonists, the very same group the Stranger themselves came from, are unceremoniously jettisoned into space, as per the plan. The board then freezes a majority of Halcyon's existing population, effectively culling the colony to a manageable size while the elite remain in power. Halcyon limps on, with only the very wealthy enjoying life and everyone else literally put on ice. The Stranger might get a fancy apartment in Byzantium for their trouble, but it's a hollow victory in an even more hollow society. The companions, depending on their alignments and the Stranger's choices, often drift apart or meet bitter ends in this timeline. The colony's final state is quite bleak. A few lavish cities thriving on the labor of indentured popsicle workers, and a bunch of ghost towns slowly rotting away as resources run out. Luckily, in the heroic path where the Stranger chooses hope, no pun intended, over despair, Halcyon begins to heal, free from the board's lies. The colony stands on the cusp of a new era, driven by innovation and a spirit of cooperation between the once disparate factions. However, no matter what path the Stranger took, one mystery remains unresolved. What's going on with Earth? The cradle of humanity has gone dark, with no communications, supply drops, or anything else for over 3 years. Furthermore, the Earth Directorate's frigate disappeared en route to Earth 2 years prior, leaving the planet's fate currently unknown. On that cryptic note, the Stranger's journey comes to a close. They woke up from decades of cryosleep, saved a colony from self-destruction, toppled a corporate regime, and solved a few murders and mysteries along the way. Not bad for someone who started out their adventure by falling out of the sky onto their only ally. With Earth still silent and the rifts between colonies widening, the Earth Directorate turns its gaze towards a distant world called Arcadia, a place where time itself seems to bend, and where new powers are rising to seize control of the future. Whatever awaits us there, one thing's for certain: the next fight for humanity's future is just beginning. Hey everybody, thanks so much for watching this one. I've been pumping these videos out like crazy lately, and it's all thanks to folks like you who are still watching and listening to my dumb voice. So if you like spending the last hour or so with me, please click that like button and help me out in these strange algorithmic times. Seriously, I don't know what's going on with YouTube lately. Also, make sure you leave me a comment letting me know what you'd like to see me cover next, and subscribe to see my videos as they drop. An extreme thanks goes to the Patreon supporters and channel members on screen, who get early access to these videos, as well as the satisfaction of helping feed these adorable kitties on screen. You can join them by checking out the links in the description. Thanks again, I've been Suggestive Gaming, and now you're in the know.